We will now begin our program, Clear Your Thoughts, Clear Your Clutter, and I will now turn it over to Susan McCarthy, professional organizer from A Less Clutter Life. Hello, Susan.
Hello, and thank you for having me here today. This is one of my favorite programs to talk about, and I'm just going to ask Raluca if you can, in fact, see my see the screen that I'm sharing right now.
Yes, everything
Okay,
looks great. Yes.
okay, awesome. Um, so I think the I think this was one of the first programs that I created, and I have probably tweaked this more than any of the other presentations I do, because I just love the idea so much of addressing your thoughts that um, can make it so difficult to clear clutter, um, because that it really isn't as easy as grab a trash bag and throw stuff in the trash bag. A lot of times, some people will say, oh, well, just grab a trash bag and just get started. And it sounds like it's going to work. And a lot of times people will walk into a room and they might clear away some surface clutter, maybe boxes left over from an Amazon delivery, or um, a cup or some trash from a snack that was left behind. And you can clean up some of these surface things, the dried out pen, the notes or receipts, and you feel like you're doing something, and then you start going and touching other items, and it suddenly becomes much more difficult, once you kind of clear away that surface level of stuff. It becomes much more difficult to decide, do I keep this? Should I let go of it? What should I do with this? So hopefully I can address some of that in today's program. So there is a handout that you can download. If you have your phone handy, you can click that QR code on the left-hand corner, and if not, you can make a note to go to my website, alessclutteredlife.com/thoughts dash handout. And that doesn't require you to sign up for my emails or anything like that. I would love if you did. Um, but you can just go directly to that location and download the PDF of the handout for this program. And I will show this information again at the end. So today we're going to talk about a few different aspects of clearing your thoughts and clearing your clutter. Um, for example, identifying your purpose for decluttering, which can really help clarify what you want to keep and what you can let go of. How to figure out if you just need to declutter, if you need to declutter, or if you really just need to tidy and straighten a room, like maybe things just need to be put away, but because they haven't been, the room kind of looks cluttered. So we'll kind of address that level, and how to sort out what's clutter and what isn't. And that is really that's your personal definition of what is clutter to you and what isn't. I know you can go onto Pinterest or different websites and find lists of, the 30 things you should declutter this month, but really decluttering is a very personal act as to what you find useful and what is not useful. And we'll also talk about how to clear your thoughts and feelings about stuff so you can let go of unnecessary things. So if you're like, well, I really don't see a use for this, but oh, I don't know if I can get rid of it, um, we'll also talk about that as well. So we're kind of funneling down from, why you want to declutter, to looking at the function of a space, to looking at the decisions you're making about different items, And then really at the core is like your expectations for how you want to be able to use the spaces in your home. I mean, this is really why you want to declutter, is to make spaces something pleasant. So, first up, we're going to talk about identifying your purpose for decluttering. And as defined by AI, decluttering is the process of removing unnecessary items from a space to make it more pleasant and useful. And, for all the books and TV shows and YouTube videos and, articles written about decluttering, it's really the goal is to make your space pleasant and useful. And just it's such a simple sounding um, result. Um, so how do you get to that simple result is to look at your reason or the purpose for decluttering. It's very different if you are trying to clear a space for a particular upcoming event. Are you hosting a party, or you have maybe somebody is coming to stay with you, and that gives you a very different reason and a very different timeline for decluttering than if you're downsizing, retiring and downsizing, or are trying to make your space more livable. So a strong why keeps you motivated, in part because whenever you're holding an item and you're like, I can't quite decide what to do, you can look back and say, well, why am I decluttering this room? And, is this item that I'm holding, is this really going to help, me do things in this room? Or, is it going to help my life in some way? And so always kind of going back to, your reason for decluttering can really give you some clarity about what decisions you need to make and keep you motivated. It's not a fast and easy process. It does, it takes time, and it can be exhausting because everything you pick up you need to think about, make a decision, and you can get this decision fatigue where your brain just starts going, I'm done making decisions, really stop making me make decisions. And it at that point, like, you just can't make effective decisions. So, if that happens, you might be really frustrated that, well, I want to work for 2 more hours, but now you can't really make a clear decision. And that can be important when you're decluttering. You want to be able to feel that that the decisions you make really are meaningful and useful for you and for your home. So, what type of why can you use for decluttering? In some cases, you might use an aim, this positive vision of what you want to look toward, and really, you can take like 30 seconds a day and just kind of envision like being in your home and seeing the cleared spaces that you want, or being able to walk around and having things clear, and being able to find things. And so that 30 seconds a day of envisioning that can help you, start to feel like, oh yeah, I'm working toward this, I feel comfortable, this is the vision that I want. On the other hand, you might be somebody who, works with a better, like, why of something that you want to avoid. And in this case, it doesn't have to be a really realistic outcome, but you might want to exaggerate, like, oh my goodness, the worst case scenario you could think of, like, oh, the neighbors are going to find my body underneath a pile of, 40-year-old magazines that have toppled on top of me. I don't want that, I don't want that future. So, you might aim for something really positive. You might want to avoid something particularly negative. And, you might be someone who, you go in between those two visions, and that keeps you focused on what you want to do and motivated. So, if you're trying to identify why you want to declutter, um, it can also help to like really clarify how you want to use like each and every room in your house. Like, what do you really want to be able to do in a room? And when you answer that question, that can really help you figure out like what belongs here and what doesn't belong here. So, for example, like each room should be able to support your life. So, what type of activities are you doing in the room? And like, what items do you need for those activities? And by activities, I'm not talking about like, oh, well, I want to host book club or I want to throw a party. These are like, think everyday activities. So, in your bedroom, some of the things that you want to be able to do in there, you want to sleep. So, okay, you need a bed. Maybe that also means you need a night table. Um, you get dressed there. Maybe at the end of the day, you lay in bed and you read, what I do. So you want to be able to have the items that are going to help you do the things that you want to do. If you're in your living room and you want to be able to watch television, then you know what you need to watch television. Or if you're going to do a hobby in a particular room, you know what supplies you need. The other things that you would include in a room are things that you display, the things that kind of express your personality, things that express your interests and style, um, and also storage. So these could be shelves, it could be a coffee table that allows you to place things on, an end table, it could be cabinets. But this is your way of keeping the items in the room that you use in that room. So, you are going to think of like, well, how am I going to keep control of the things that I want to kind of contain them in different locations of this room? So, if you're in a room and you have items that you don't use in this particular room, but that you use in another room, then you might go, yeah, that's not particularly efficient that I have to walk all the way in here every time I want, a pair of scissors and I'm sitting on the couch working on a craft project and I need scissors all the time. So, um, looking at like those activities that you do and being able to address like what you want to store there. And this, again, this helps you identify why you're decluttering and your purpose for decluttering a particular room because you want it to make it easier to do the activities you want to do there and be able to find the things that you need. So, as I said, knowing your why helps you clear your thoughts and your clutter because it helps you see what belongs in a room and what is really distracting you when you're in that room. So, we're heading into another section, and I'm just going to ask if there were any questions that came up in the Q&A while I was talking about all that. Give a sip of
Nothing
water.
so far, no.
Okay.
No.
Okay. So next, going to talk about like how do you figure out if you need to declutter? Do you just really need to straighten things? Sometimes people are like, oh, well, I just need, I need some new shelves or I need, how do you figure out like, do you really need to get rid of things? So, one issue that creates clutter is you don't know where something belongs. Maybe you put it down temporarily and it just stays there because every time you look at it, you go, hey, I don't know where that goes. So it's easier to keep it where it is. But of course, the problem is at some point when you go looking for it, you're going to forget the random spot that you put it down and you won't be able to find it. So, if you've ever heard the saying, "A place for everything and everything in its place," and you thought, "Oh, that sounds like really fussy, like, I don't have that type of time to, put things away in such, like such detail." And really, this is a way of saving time and saving like mental energy trying to figure out where something is. If you have to go looking for something and it takes you longer than maybe 15 minutes to find something, that's really starting to impact your day, affect your schedule, affect your like mental well-being because you're like, I know I have this, where is it? So, a place for everything and everything in its place and way, um, is just saying, where am I going to go looking for this when I need it? And that's what that really simply is asking you. Um, where are you going to go looking for something when you need it? Uh, you know, if you need if you think one of your kids is sick and you need a thermometer, are you gonna look in the kitchen for that? Are you gonna look in your bedroom for that? Gonna look in the bathroom for that? So for different people, that can have, that can be, that can be something, have a different place that makes sense for you. So for some things, it might not be as like, oh, well, this is the obvious one and only place that you could possibly ever put this. It really isn't as hard line, black and white as that. You really have some, like what makes sense, what makes sense to you. Where are you going to find these things? If there's other people in your house, will they be able to find those things? The more people who potentially have to go looking for something, the more you want to like say, hey, what makes sense? Where's the best place for us to put, the postage stamps or, the scissors so that everybody can find these things. And then when you put something away, you kind of you're labeling it, although it can be completely labeled in your mind. You don't need to put little stickers everywhere. If they help, that's great. Um, but you start thinking of a spot like, oh, this is my mug shelf. So that means like when you open that kitchen cabinet and you look at that shelf, there's just mugs. You're not like fitting in, some bowls or something like that. If you're splitting a space and sharing it between, then you can think of it as, two different locations. But this way, it makes it easier when you go looking for something. You're like, oh, I'm looking for a mug. I'm going to go to the mug shelf. When you're telling somebody else where to find something, oh, open that cabinet door and you'll find it on the mug shelf, or it's in the sock drawer. So, instead of having, oh, I have socks that are kind of tucked wherever there's available space, or like a pasta and rice shelf. Um, you're not just opening your pantry going, all right, pasta is wherever I was able to kind of fit it in last time. And giving, designating a particular place just makes it easier. When you go to put something away, you know where to put it. When you go to find something, you know where to look for it. If the space is really crowded, then there's too much stuff there. And it sounds like a fussy rule, but it simplifies your life. It just makes things much clearer, um, about like where to put things and where to find things. Another issue with looking at a space is maybe you don't have the space to store or display something. And again, that could just be a matter of, okay, now there's too much space here. And one of the hardest things sometimes to accept is that, your house is a container and it has a finite space. Each room is a finite space. There's walls that define how big this space is. And it's a little bit of like personal background. Like my parents kept everything. They over the years um, as relatives retired and downsized and moved, they gave us furniture and towels and curtains and blankets and knickknacks and all of these things, and my parents just kept accepting it. Um, the attic was so crowded that there was barely space to walk. In some of the rooms, the living spaces, bedrooms that we had in our house, you had to walk sideways along a path um, to go from space to space. And, my mother's the constant thing that she said was that, if we had a bigger house, we would be organized. And while the answer could be yes, there was also probably a good chance that it just would have required more stuff, and even a bigger space would have looked the same way. And I mean, we spent years trying to organize this space by buying boxes and bins and shelving units and cabinets. And, what happens is, yes, you can put a lot of things on those shelves or in those cabinets or in those bins, but those bins and cabinets, they still take up space. And that was why over time, like all these things lining the walls at my parents' house just made the rooms smaller and smaller. And I mean, that's kind of an extreme, but there's only so much space in your home. And the more stuff you put there, um, the bigger challenge it is to feel calmer in that space, and to to be able to find things. So, organizing gadgets can help, but they're going to define a space, but they're never going to give you more space. If you have a blank section of wall that, you can hang some hooks on or put, shelves in front of or on to, to maximize your space so you can better find things, that's fantastic. I'm not against like organizing gadgets, but when you use them like with this kind of expectation that they'll give you more space, it just doesn't work. And another thing that can be a hint that you need to declutter or maybe just rearrange things is if it's inconvenient to put things away. And so if you're procrastinating putting something away because it's a hassle to put it away, then that's something to look at and go, what's the problem here? And what could be the solution? Before, for years I taught nature and art classes, and because I taught the art classes for this for the local Audubon Society, I was in charge of kind of organizing all of the art supplies that were used by camp counselors and everybody like that. And we had all of these cute little containers, um, you know, reused, upcycled containers that we would put things like pom poms and buttons and and things like that, and they had covers on them. And at the end of the day, when everybody was tired of dealing with kids, people would take like whatever pom poms or whatever the kids hadn't used, and they would just sit it on the shelf next to the next to the container. And and it finally occurred to me that, oh yeah, the cover just became an extra step, and nobody wanted to take that extra step. So, some of those cute containers with covers and stuff, it can really slow you down. So, if you have an area and you're like, oh, why don't I ever put this away? What's the problem? Well, why do I just like dump the mail here on the kitchen counter? Well, the reason why is because when I first walk in the door, that's that's a clear spot. Well, why are you putting it on the kitchen counter? Why not someplace else? Well, my home office is upstairs and I'm not going to walk all the way upstairs to, to put away the mail so, for late. So you kind of ask those questions and you keep kind of like, you know, nibbling away at, what the problem is and why is that the problem, until hopefully you come to a solution where you're like, oh yeah, okay, this is what I need to do. I need to, put a basket so that I can collect the mail, but also it's going to be really easy just to pick up this basket, carry it upstairs, dump it onto my desk later on in the day, and then bring the basket back downstairs. But sometimes you have to go, instead of just going, oh gosh, why don't I put this stuff away, is to ask, well, no, really, why don't I put this stuff away? What's the problem here? And do a little problem solving. So those were some things to consider. Like, do you need to declutter a space? Do you need to, rearrange things? Like, how easy is it for you to find things? How easy is it for you to put things away? And to keep those sort of consideration. And I'll take another little sip and ask if there have been any questions.
No questions so far.
Okay. So we're going to next kind of segue into, how do you sort what's clutter and what's a desirable item? Because if you've ever had the sensation or, the situation where you're like, oh, this room is such a mess, I need to declutter. And you walk in and you pick up something and you're like, oh, yeah, I don't know what to do with that. I'm going to leave that there. And then you pick up something else and you're like, maybe I'll need this. And you put it down and you kind of, you start handling all these items and you're like, well, I thought the room was cluttered, but I need all of this stuff. So maybe I'll just buy some boxes and put things in boxes and it will make things look neater. And again, that's kind of missing, going back to, why do you really want to declutter? Like, what do you want from your home and what do you want for your home? So I always love this quote from a professional organizer, Barbara Hempel, and it's, clutter is delayed decisions. And actually, she worded it as, clutter is postponed decisions, but I think she missed the opportunity for the alliteration of delayed decisions. So that kind of means, like, you're holding off on making a decision about an item. Where does this belong? I don't know. I'm going to put it down here. Do I need this? Maybe later. So we put it down. And this, for a moment, kind of relieves a bit of stress. Like, we're sitting there going, oh, what do I do with this? What do I do with this? And we make a decision, I'll just keep it. And our brain goes, ah, thank goodness, like, she made a decision and things get to stay the same. Nothing's going to change. Phew, that's great. That's just what I want. And oddly, that is kind of what our brains want. But in a way, you've just kind of made like a pseudo decision. You've made this like fake decision that it feels like you've decided, but really you've put off on making a decision about something. So I might need this, so I should hold on to it. Or someone gave this to me, so, I should hold on to it because it was a gift. Or, and they might be angry if I got rid of it. Or, maybe, someday my grandkids are going to be like, hey, do you have any clothes from the 1980s? Because we're going to this party that's a 1980s party. And you're like, I am going to hold on to like boxes of stuff so they have things to choose from. So you kind of feel like, if I hold on to these things, I'm doing them. It's going to be, a great result someday. I'll save the day. Or again, I don't know where this belongs, so I'm just going to leave this here until I decide. And, I think, getting rid of things is very stressful for people because you're like, well, it's that whole joke of the moment I get rid of this, I'm gonna need it. And I have to say, the only people I've ever really like talked with who truly regretted things that they got rid of, um, they weren't decluttering. It really sounds like they had this a very like emotional situation and they got rid of stuff in this like emotional reaction of, "Ugh, I'm never going to be an artist. I need to get rid of all of the paintings I've ever done." Or, um, it just becomes this like very, um, it becomes an overly emotional reaction. And they're not really thinking like, are these things important to me? Do I want to keep them? Don't I want to keep them? Um, it's just this, ugh, I gotta, emotional reaction. Um, one time I had somebody who said, well, I went to a doctor and or an acupuncturist, and they told me to drink this tea, and I would make it in a pitcher. And so they're like, and I remembered that years ago I had a pitcher in my kitchen, but I had decluttered it and I had put it in a box, and that box went into my basement. So I went through my basement and I found that box and I pulled out that pitcher that I had put in that box 10 years ago. And she's like, so how can decluttering, like, how can I get rid of things if I'm going to end up needing it? And I was like, how much time, you know, did you spend like looking for that item? And, here's a bunch of stuff that obviously you decluttered and it's still taking up space and probably physical and mental space in your home. And, for the price of something that you could spend like 10 or $12 on, and like you held on to it for 10 years. And so, sometimes they're just like overly concerned, like, this will be a huge disaster if you get rid of something. And it kind of comes down to like some perspective. Like, can you go out? Like, yeah, you don't want to get rid of something and then buy it the next day. But, you know, if 5 years down the road you need something that you got rid of, is it, is it like this huge inconvenience that, you're going to order something new that cost you 10 or $20? So it's a perspective to consider. Like I said, you obviously don't want to be like getting rid of things willy-nilly thinking, well, if I need it again I'll just buy it again. um because that doesn't help the environment or anything like that. But um it um well, there's an attendance pole flashing in front of my face. um so being able to, you know be a little clearer about like what you want to hold on to and what you want to let go of. And okay, um, so Veluca, can I get rid of this attendance poll that's here?
Yes, of course.
Oh, okay, okay. I just didn't know if you had to capture some data. um so always kind of going back to like, why am I decluttering the space? If your bedroom is so cluttered that you um like it's the last thing you see at the end of the day, it's the first thing you see at the beginning of the day, and this really like affects your sleep and affects your mood at the beginning of the day, then it's going and saying, no, this, decluttering the space is going to make a big difference to, to my sleep and to my attitudes. How do I feel about like holding on to some of this stuff? Is the stuff that I'm haven't used for 5 years and can't imagine using for another 5 years, um, or even beyond that. Is this really important to me? So how do how do you clear some of these limiting thoughts and beliefs that are saying, I should hold on to this. I really can't get rid of this. The moment I get rid of this, I'm going to need this, or figure out what that cord was for, or something like that. Excuse me. Um, so if you find yourself like making statements about things that are these really like all or nothing statements like I should hold on to this, or I have to hold on to this, or I can't get rid of this. And to pause and to ask yourself, well, why is that? Why am I saying that? And and kind of addressing like, well, why do I have to hold on to this? Why is that so important to me? If I didn't have this, what would the result be? Or, I can't get rid of this because I inherited this or something. I think there we go. So I mean, you can have lots of reasons for why you're thinking I have to, I must, I can't get rid of this. I have to keep it. Um, so for example, something if something was free, sometimes we're like, well, I can't get rid of it. It was free. Um, but, you know, at some point there's only so many t-shirts that you can hold on to from different groups, or tote bags or water bottles. And at some point it becomes excess, and basically you're like renting out your home as advertising space for different organizations, only you're not getting anything. You're just dealing with like t-shirts and water bottles. Um, it's worth a lot of money. And if that's something that is a concern of yours, like that something is worth a lot of money, find out. Like take it to an antique dealer, or whoever the appropriate appraiser would be, and find out if it's worth something. I remember growing up, and like my mother was always pointing to this vase in my grandparents' house, that's going to be yours, that's going to be yours when you grow up. It's an antique. It's, make sure. And, when my grandfather died, it was like, oh, okay, we got to wrap this up. Okay. I'll store it for you because, it's an antique. It's very valuable and blah, blah. And, um, I was offered all of $10 for it because it was just a style, of vase that nobody wanted. Um, and, so if you've ever watched, oh my goodness, like Antique Roadshow, and people or Pawn Stars, where people are like, oh, I want $10,000 for this, and they're looking at them going, it's worth $100. It's a replica or something like that. So if you think something is worth a lot of money, and that's why you have to hold on to it, sometimes it's worth like finding out what it's really worth. It was a gift, and this is a huge challenge. But when somebody gives you something, it's now yours. It's not theirs. You're not keeping it for them. It was something that was given to you. If you don't like it, don't keep it. If you feel guilty that you have to like keep it, but you have it stored in a box that's in like some really inconvenient place in your home, you have to say, well, yeah, you have the item, but is it really, are you really showing like appreciation for this item? Is that, is keeping it in a box in an inconvenient space really better than passing the item along to a charity or to somebody else who might actually appreciate it and use it? Um, I inherited this. Again, you know, there's a lot of emotions there depending on the person that got the item from. But again, if your memories are inside of you, and if the item doesn't mean anything to you, other than it was owned by somebody, I mean, you can certainly make that decision that you don't want that item. You have what's important. You have the memories that are important to you. Thinking you might use something someday. Um, I remember a friend as she was decluttering her house, and she's like, "Oh, I have like a huge box of yarn from like when you were teaching me and the kids to crochet, and I have like a bin of yarn and crochet hooks and all of this stuff." And I was like, "Well, I mean, you don't crochet anymore, so do you really want the stuff?" And she's like, "Well, like in 10 years when my life gets a little, you know, more normalized, like it settles down, well, maybe then I'll want to use it." And I was like, "You're just going to hold on to a bin of yarn just in case you decide to go back to this hobby." Um, it took her a while, but she gave me the yarn and I used it and I like made things and donated them to charity. So I hope she felt good about that as well. Um, if something it's, too important to let go, again, that might be something related to a job that you had. And, sometimes like over time, your perspective changes on these different items. So, um, just because you make a decision about something this year, it doesn't mean that in 3 months or 6 months or a year or 3 years or down the road that you're going to feel the same way about that item. So, your perspective can always change on items. And I'm keeping this for someone. Oh my goodness. People are always like, "Well, I'm keeping all this artwork for my kids." And let me just say that like older adults who I know who are like now handing a bin of stuff, maybe curated bin of stuff, to their kids who are in their 40s, like happy 40th birthday. Here's your childhood in a box. Um, and all of these parents are like, my kids just looked at me like I was crazy. Why did you keep all this stuff? Um, so, if you're keeping things for someone, um, yeah, kind of be clear on like what you hope them to get, how you hope they're going to benefit from that, you know, putting, you know, 20 years of childhood and school in one box. Okay. Even if they don't want to look at it, it's one box. Um, Keeping like every test paper and coloring page they ever did. Um, yeah, that's not going to help anybody. Um, okay, which kind of goes into a question of how to declutter belongings from a deceased loved one. And I mean, yeah, that is it's a huge challenge. And like I was just saying, like something that you can't address this year, you might be able to address next year. Um, but I would say don't look at the box of stuff that you have from them. Actually, like make a point of going through the box because for a lot of times the the idea that like this box contains all of this stuff from this person's life and a lot of times like when you're if you're cleaning out somebody's house or you're collecting items like you end up like you get to a point where it's like you're overtired and you just start grabbing things and putting them in a box. They're not necessarily like curated favorite items. And you end up with a box with like somebody's like grocery list that's all crossed out or receipts from a store and like back before they used the heat sensitive paper, so it was like that purple mimeograph kind of typeface and you can't even it's just like faded over time. sometimes people open up these boxes of stuff that, this was mom's stuff, this was dad's stuff, my grandparents, my kids' stuff. Um, and it becomes bigger and bigger because they aren't actually looking at the specific things. Um, so, this doesn't mean you have to go through this box and be tossing stuff. You might just be going from the box, taking stuff out, and then putting stuff right back in the box because you're not ready to go through those things. Um, but I think it's very important to actually like see what those things are so that it's not like in your head this big like this is their stuff. Um, as if it's like a single entity, even though it's a bunch of small things. Um, because I think I mean, at my parents' house, they had so much stuff sitting in boxes that when my brother and I went through things, we didn't even know who it had belonged to. And because there was so much of it and it wasn't identified, it had no meaning to us. Um, and there was so much of it, there were points I'm like, I don't even know if this had any meaning to my parents. They put it in boxes and then put it up in the attic. So I'm not even sure how important this is to me or it was to them. Um, so this can be a little scary quote, um, that clutter is the physical manifestation of what is going on inside of us. So, if things are very cluttered, I know personally, like when there's a lot going on, I don't keep after things as well as I do at other times. And yeah, I know mentally I am um, more scattered because I can see all of this stuff um, around because it just becomes like that. Oh, I'm just gonna pile this here. So clutter can be a physical manifestation of what's going on inside your head. Um, so I remember years ago or a few years ago talking to my husband because I was like trying to work out a what to include in a presentation or a program about decluttering. And as I was like kind of talking and elaborating, and I paused, and he looked at me and he's like, "How many different ways are there to tell people to throw things in a trash bag?" And I kind of rolled my eyes and laughed, but um, there's a lot, and in part because it's not as easy as picking things up because you have to decide, well, when I pick this up, how do I know it goes in a trash bag, whether that trash bag is going, you know, to the trash or whether it's a bag that's going to be taken to a charity. How do you decide what what is going to happen to these different items? So it is not as quick and easy as like, oh, let me just use it. So this is my own little blurt that I have to figure out a way of making it shorter because it's just kind of an idea that has been bouncing around my head. That decluttering kind of acknowledges that your life has changed. Um, because you no longer need these things or you no longer have an interest in items related to a particular hobby or past. Um, and so your thoughts and your feelings about those like past experiences and expectations and aspirations you had for your life are different than they once were. So, you're usually not decluttering things that you're currently using because you're using them and you don't have any question. And actually, that can be a really great way to start decluttering is to walk into a room and go, okay, what do I want to keep here? Well, if this is my bedroom and I want to sleep and I want to have a place to, stack up the books that I'm reading at night, um, you can decide like, okay, these are the things that I need to keep in this room because they're going to support those goals. Um, but when it comes to like decluttering things, usually the things that you're getting rid of are things that you haven't used for a while or haven't been important to your life for a while. That, these are things related to past experiences, or maybe even like the expectations and aspirations. You bought things that you never used because, you thought X, Y, or Z was going to be part of your life. And it just never worked out that way. So, when you're decluttering, you're really saying, gee, you know what? My life has changed and I don't need this anymore. And that can be a little, I think that can kind of be like the scary point because, you know, your life changed so gradually you may not have noticed, like, oh, I no longer do this activity anymore. Um, but when it comes to decluttering, you have to say, oh, gee, you know what? I don't do this anymore. I haven't done this for years. And that can be a little scary because you're suddenly like faced with, yeah, my life has been changing. And wow, look at how it's changed in the past, X years. So, some ways to kind of deal with some of the items that you are letting go of, if you're finding it challenging. If you can put it in that trash bag, go for it. But if you're finding it challenging, you can express some gratitude for the part that these things had in your life, um, even if it taught you something that you didn't want to have in your life, like, gee, why do I keep buying, yellow shirts? I like the color yellow, but I don't like it on me. Gee, I'm decluttering all of these yellow shirts. I am so grateful that I have learned this lesson not to buy yellow shirts. Um, when you have a core of truly sentimental items, like putting them in a keepsake box or a shadow box, or I'll say the word shrine, but that could just be like a shelf or a tabletop where maybe you display a couple of items related to a person or a part of your life. And, you're still like making those things. You're saying these things are in fact important to me because I'm keeping them, you know, keeping them visible and making them a part of my life. Sometimes you can kind of close that loop of, gee, I need to do something with this, simply by deciding you're done with this. Like, I am not going to ever finish this project. I can get rid of the items. Um, gee, I'm never going to knit again. So I can get rid of all of these things related to that so that, you know, I'm not, I don't have to keep thinking, gee, am I going to get back to, am I going to get back to knitting in like 5 or 10 years? You answer the question because you're like, you know what? Let's just get rid of those things. Um, or maybe, you feel, you kind of, you feel stressed because you have that item and it's kind of demanding something of you. Like, I need to do something with this. I need to finish this project. And again, that kind of goes back to that idea of, making a decision that, you know what, I'm done, and decluttering this item shows that I'm done. Um, so sometimes one decision kind of covers numerous decisions. If you realize, like, gee, I don't need these old skis because I haven't been skiing for years. Well, any accessories or any clothing that was used for skiing, you don't even have to decide each time you come up to these items. You're like, oh, yeah, I don't ski anymore. I don't need this. So sometimes one decision covers a lot of decisions. Um, and, thinking about, like, are these are these items really a part of the life I'm living right now? Are they really supporting the things that truly interest me right now? And kind of a fun way of, if you're really stuck on something, is going, well, what if my best friend came to me and was describing the same situation I'm in right now? What advice would I give them? And a lot of times when you're thinking of the advice you'd give somebody else, um, sometimes you can answer your own questions. Um, so speaking of questions, okay, so before you donate items that you don't need, but want to remember, yes, take pictures and put those pictures in a separate album in your photo library. Yeah, that is always always good advice. You can take a picture. I do have to say I've never actually heard of anybody who's gone back and looked at the pictures, but a lot of times taking the pictures um, can help let go of the items. Any ideas on how to organize medical records? Um, hmm, yeah, so if yeah, so if you hmm, yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on like how many you actually, are these the let's try again. One thing to consider is with medical records is, do you have duplicates? Because sometimes there ends up being like, oh, I need duplicates of all of these things. Um, you can clear those out. Um, in a lot of cases, it's deciding, do I want to, organize these things by date? Um, or does it make more sense to organize them by a particular condition or something that maybe was being um, cared for or resulted in a hospital stay or surgery, and group those together. um and it yeah, I mean, are those important for you to have? Like, are those something that you still refer back to? And I know in a lot of cases that they can be. Um, but I would say, like, probably the biggest thing would be like, are there duplicates of things here? Because having duplicates in the same spot just doesn't help. It doesn't provide a backup for anything. Um, and in most cases, I think like putting things by like separate people and put things by year um, would probably give you the best access if you had to refer back to things. So I hope that helped. Okay, go back to the last quote slide. Clear some of this stuff. Um, there we go. So decluttering and organizing isn't easy. You're not really cleaning your home. And I think that's a lot of times we get caught up in the idea that decluttering and organizing is really just another household chore. But as I said, it really is acknowledging and enacting some of the changes that have already occurred in your life and deciding what do you need and what can you get rid of. Um, I don't know if there are any more questions. We're
No, not any more questions. No.
okay.
Yeah.
Um, so
Oh, two
I
questions.
don't, I'm not finding the handout. Only ditch the decluttering. I after I get off the screen, I will go to the website and make sure that the handout is there, because it should be a page that just if you go to the exact page. Oh, I'm going in the wrong direction. Here we go.
I will
Um,
send out the handout. I will email everybody the
oh, okay. Thank you.
recording link, and I will also attach this handout in a couple of days. So if you can find it on the website,
Okay.
and I will definitely email you.
Okay. Yeah. If you just go to a lessclutteredlife.com, you're going to go to like my freebie offer of um, ditch the decluttering overwhelm. But if you add that / and do thoughts and handouts, it's a little hidden page. It's not a freebie that I want everybody to have. Um, just people who come to these programs. And to the person who said they enjoyed the program, thank you very much. So thank you for everyone who came out and watched this tonight. And I hope that it gave you some good thoughts on how to process through some of the clutter in your home.
Yeah. Thank you, Susan, so much for your thoughtful presentation. I really like the idea of getting rid of things that don't serve us and are present. It's like kind of letting go of the past and just be more present, just live in the now. So thank you so much. We loved having you, and I hope your presentation was helpful to all the participants. I will just say a few things about the upcoming programs at the Algonquin Area Library. Next week, Tuesday, January 23rd at 7 p.m., we'll have a virtual program, 10 Ways to Jumpstart Your Genealogy. Whether you're stuck in a rut or just want to build on your skills, join us in welcoming author James McCarthy, that genealogy guy. Then on Saturday, January 27 at 10 a.m. in the large meeting room on Harnish, we will be hosting the history of coffee. Join us for a tasty and informative program about the history of and science of coffee. Explore regional references and insights and experience an immersive tasting at the end. And the whole week between January 22nd and 26th, the library will collect puzzles at both Harnish and Eastgate. And on January 27th, there will be a puzzle swap at 1 p.m. in the program room on Harnish. Thank you, everyone, for being with us tonight, and hope to see you soon at our future programs. Thank you, Susan, and have a good night.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.